Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to present on this. And just to highlight that um, this is as a result of a complete coincidence insofar as that in the Samvera Europe community, we were seeking to arrange a meetup. The first time we were able to meet up face to face in 4 years, sometime during this year. And we picked this date in September, which happened to be on Monday. And then by sheer coincidence, Aaron announced that the Fedora showcase was going to take place the same week. So it was a sort of a fortunate coincidence that the two were able to coincide. And we were able to have theme discussions. I know for some people who have been to both, and I'd like to say big shout out to Tom, who certainly was, and just to Dan, who were at the meeting on Monday as well. So thank you very much for that. Just by way of introduction, I'm Chris Orr. I'm the University Librarian at the University of Hull. And I suppose Hull, because of our engagement and involvement with what was Hydra, now Samvera, from its early days, has acted as a sort of fulcrum around which community activity has taken place in Europe to date. So to share a summary of the discussions that took place on Monday. Firstly, just to showcase Samvera Europe. We are a regional grouping of those organizations participating in the Samvera community within Europe. And just for clarity, I include UK in that definition of Europe. Clearly, because there's a link between Samvera and Fedora, a number of those organizations also participate in the Fedora community, and I've already mentioned Tom. Dan was also there on Monday, of course, and I'd like to also sort of highlight the fact that I know James has been taking place from the Open University, and we had one of his colleagues attending on Monday as well. Notwithstanding the fact that we're a regional grouping, the focus of activity within the community as a whole is always intended to be in the broader Samvera channel, so that we are international in scope, in much the same way that Fedora operates as well. And then we do have these periodic meetings to help coalesce and specific areas of focus for European organizations and foster sharing of experience. Yes.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. I don't know if your slides are meant to be following along, but we look kind of hung on your PowerPoint page.
Oh, what, the opening one? The opening one?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, right. Okay. Because I can see it. It looks like it's advancing for me.
You might be shared on the wrong window, I wonder.
Maybe. Hang on, let me de-share and then reshare again.
All right. There we go. Now I think we're caught up.
And if I move it forward, and if I move it forward, does that change?
Yes, we are good.
Yes. Okay,
that's
fine.
perfect.
Good.
Sorry,
okay,
sorry to derail
thank you
there.
for flagging it. Thank you. So just to highlight the range of institutions involved in the Samvera community in Europe, we have a number of UK universities, of course, University of Hull I mentioned, Oxford, where Tom is, but also University of York, Durham University, and then further afield we have Trinity College Dublin. They weren't able to come at the very last moment on Monday, but it's the Digital Repository of Ireland that's based at Trinity College. And then we had a representative from Ruhr University in Bochum in Germany, which is very much concentrating on the research data in their implementation. We were very kindly hosted by the British Library, and the British Library is going great guns with the implementation of its use of Samvera technologies and acting as a host for a number of other organizations to do likewise. I highlight the three organizations on the right-hand side because a key part of the community discussions is engagement with our vendors, and on the right, some of which you may recognize, some of which you may not. We had 3 vendors present on Monday as well. CoSector, which is very much a part of the University of London, provides a whole host of repository-related services to the sector. Antleaf, which provides consultancy services around the development of repositories, and Ubiquity, which is quite well known, of course, for their open access publishing activity, but now increasingly, of course, looking to move into and developing repository solutions. One of the key discussions on Monday was very much about Samvera and Fedora, because this was the first opportunity that we as a Samvera community in the UK and Europe at least had been able to come together to consider the impact, benefit, otherwise of Fedora 6. And hence it was a key topic of conversation at the meeting. It's just a highlight, of course, is that everyone, at least they're using Samvera applications or Samvera-based applications, is still using Fedora as the underlying repository system. And that is mostly a mixture of Fedora 3 for those sites, including ourselves here at Hull, who have not migrated, and Fedora 4. Inevitably, I suppose, from a Samvera point of view, you may or may not be aware of the Samvera Valkyrie initiative. I know that Heather gave a talk about the Samvera community generally at the beginning of this showcase on Tuesday, and she will have mentioned it there. And there was strong interest in the discussion about where that's at, how it's going to be developed, what options it provides. And I think the key thing is that it is about providing options about where those people wishing to implement and run and operate Samvera-based repositories, what do they use as their backend? So there is quite a lot of interest in understanding how the Valkyrie initiative can support the existing Samvera implementations in their migration from their existing Fedora to Fedora 6. Equally, there are some institutions, and I think it depends on the use case that they have primarily, who are interested in understanding about how they could use Valkyrie, because it's a way of migrating off Fedora to maybe something like Postgres, which has been the, in a sense, alternative of choice so far. And that's primarily to do with whether or not they feel that Fedora is serving their needs, or whether or not they just want something simpler and they don't need what Fedora offers necessarily. It has to be said that as a community, most were wary of going first, or taking too early a step. I realized that in a community such as this, the Samvera one and also the Fedora one, it's important and valuable that there are people who are willing to go first, so to speak. It's going to be incredibly valuable to share feedback around any migrations that do take place, both within general Fedora upgrades and migrations, but also within the context of Samvera implementations as well. And to that end, I'd very much like to say thank you to Dan, coming all the way to London from his home in Aberystwyth, to give us an update on Fedora 6 from his perspective, which I think was valuable to the group who had not necessarily explored Fedora 6 in any great detail. It was helpful to them to understand the context and what Fedora 6 offered. And it was fantastic to hear that a lot of the ongoing work is around testing and assessing more information about what it means to run and operate Fedora 6 in order to help inform the community more about the impact of migrating to Fedora 6 going forward. And as I said, gathering feedback about migrations will, of course, be very helpful. Other than that, the conversation was primarily, I suppose, about trying to appreciate the similarities between Fedora 3 and Fedora 6, which of course have been highlighted as quite a lot in the move to Fedora 6, but interestingly, primarily about the role and use of linked data within Fedora 6, and that generally led to a discussion about ongoing use or not use of linked data within our infrastructures. So moving on, two other themes just to highlight that we were main topics of conversation, so I suppose just where the community members were. One was around open research. So certainly in the UK, but increasingly across Europe as well, there's a huge shift towards open research, a desire to encourage open research, foster open research, support open research. So of course, one of the conversation topics is, well, how can our repositories serve open research in that context? Discussion highlighted the fact that one of the great benefits of Fedora and Samvera is that we have a whole host of open interfaces. And in the context of open research, it feels like a real opportunity to capitalize on those open interfaces to help support what open research wants to achieve and deliver. It's about making use of available services to streamline management of content from open research, which means getting involved in the open research community, understanding what those processes are so we can understand what it means to manage content within them. And not least because, of course, so much of open research revolves around research data. What is the interest in viewing? There's a lot of interest in how we work with data, and particularly packaged data, and how we can view files within packaged data, how we use different identifiers for different purposes in order to facilitate that curation of that content through its workflows. And then I suppose sitting slightly to one side of that, we also talked about media presentation and getting a feel of sharing about where people were at with IIIF. It does feel, I think there was a general sense in which people felt that there was a clear set of solutions, but there was still the issues of how do you actually make that work in practice in a production environment. And so there was essentially a sharing of ideas about how to do that. Thinking about some of the institutional updates we received, and just to give some context to those, the British Library, as I mentioned, is looking to grow the number of UK organisations it supports, which are known, certainly in the UK, as independent research organisations. And they're all coming in and hosting their repositories within their Samvera Haiku instance, which allows you to have multiple repositories in the same cloud environment. Oxford, and I'm sure Tom has described this in far better detail than I could ever do, is looking at finding additional ways of enhancing the metadata they hold for research outputs, and is, I think this was the theme of his talk the other day, developing a Fedora 6-backed OCFL digital preservation system. We had an update from the University of York, which I think is the focus, and a key operational focus, of course, is recognizing that they have some well-established solutions in place, some services in place, but that, of course, they are now facing, from an operational perspective, how do you deal with these older customized versions of Hyrax in this instance, and how you then migrate them to newer versions or newer solutions going forward. And CoSector, as I mentioned, is a vendor, is working with a number of clients. And I suppose one of the common themes across those is quite a few of them were trying to make use of Archivematica in tandem with Hyrax as a repository solution as part of digital preservation workflows. But within that, there were a number of variations of how those digital preservation workflows could operate. Okay, I'd stop there and say thank you very much for the opportunity to share our experiences from Samvera Europe, but happy to take any questions in the meantime.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for bringing that back. I think you're right. It was nice timing to be able to kind of layer those on, and I'm glad that you were able to come and give this this recap for everybody.